Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Hurling podcast with your host, Mark Kennedy. I have Kieran Collins with me tonight. Kieran, how are things?
Good, Mark. Are you well?
Oh, sure, grand, all good. God, that was a very exciting weekend of action there, I suppose. Headlines really, Limerick beating Waterford, and I thought it was a phenomenal game in the TUS Gaelic grounds. Clare cruised past a very poor tip challenge in FBD Semple Stadium. Dublin probably the marquee headline in Leinster, beating Wexford by a point, and I think deservedly so, and we'll run the rule over that. And there were routine wins for Kilkenny and Galway as kind of Laois and Westmeath kind of struggled to kind of hit the heights of round one. So maybe, Kieran, we'll focus in on the TUS Gaelic grounds. I thought it was a superb game from start to finish. The physicality was unreal. What were your thoughts?
Absolutely. It was living up to be a classic, and I suppose it didn't disappoint. Two teams have really fronted up to each other physically. I suppose in hindsight, looking back, both teams having a break, so I suppose they could afford to go at it. I know Limerick probably came out the worst in the end regarding the loss of Cian Lynch, but adding to the long injury list. But looking at the game as a whole, it was just tit for tat all the way, I suppose, until 55th, 60th minute, and I suppose Limerick showing how good a team they are. They just started to pull away. I think it's a real sign of a team that like two quick goals in succession, and a point in the game. Like majority of teams would probably have folded at that point, but I think Cody even alluded to it after the game, like to create the next six scoring chances. They only converted two, but like the fact that they were there converting the chances, it is a positive. I think like scoring accuracy is probably something that it was always an issue in Limerick, and it's something that they've really improved on in over the years. But I think as the season go on, you'll probably see that success rate improve. And I suppose if it does, it's a scary thought for teams who are trying to contest against them.
Yeah, absolutely, Kieran. I thought it was fascinating, even at the start of the match, just to see the personnel switches. Sean Fitton switched to left full back, and then also you had Conor Prunty as well on Gerard Hegarty. I thought there were fascinating switches straight off the bat. There was a bit of kind of mind games going on there, and I mean Hegarty was probably a fairly prominent figure at the start of the match. There was a kind of an early challenge there. Someone could have debated could be yellow. He did get a yellow, but he did get an awful lot of punishment as well. Kieran, I didn't think he got much protection from the referee on the night as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose in a way you look at it, Hegarty has his cards marked with referees. I just think with Hegarty, looking at him, it's more so just an awkwardness about him. Like, it looks like he is a real dirty player, but I think it's just because his sheer size and his physicality that, but when it comes to the other side, when he's on the ball, he's taking a lot of hits there and not getting any protection, as you said, from the ref from him. So I can totally understand his frustration, and I think to be fair, he's holding that fairly well. He's keeping the lid on it. I think he's probably learned a lot from the Galway game and the red card, and it's important that he does keep his composure, and I suppose that's his way of winning it against the naysayers, I suppose.
Absolutely, Kieran. Yeah, because I thought he was very prominent even, for primary ball possession. He won his fair share again. That one where he did catch the ball, he's been absolutely dragged, and then waiting for a free, that never really happened. I thought it was the crowd really kind of let the referee kind of know about things. But I think going back to the match itself, I mean, Cian Lynch going off after 8 minutes, I thought it was a significant kind of blow for Limerick. But in fairness, step forward, Collin, the great core manager man, really delivered, I thought, in spades, and has to be, dare I say, a candidate to maybe start more games for Limerick in the championship this season.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of it's commendable to the management. Like they're not rushing these young guys in. Last year Collin was introduced to the senior team. He would have come on for one or two games, probably more so in the league. Same with like another up and coming star like Adam English. Like this year we got a few minutes in a couple of games. We're not going to see any more of him. So like they're not rushing these guys. They're bringing them along slowly. They're getting them the experience they need, and like to be fair, this year Collin has just really stepped up. He's exceptional. Some of his shot selection might be a bit questionable, but I think that's all just down to experience. I think that will just get better. He's strong, he's quick. And I think if you were to listen to John Kiley after the game, whether it's Cian Lynch or Kyle Hayes that goes off, it's just, in their eyes, it's the next man in. So the next man who's there in that squad, and they just do the same job. And like another team to lose their talisman like Cian Lynch, it should be, a real negative for the team. And it is a negative that Cian Lynch lost out or had to go off injured. But to come in and fill shoes like of Lynch's, and he was just incredible, I thought.
I think, a real good trait of a player is that the ball is always attracted to a player. And I feel that with Collin an awful lot, that the ball gets attracted to him. He's a great game reader. He does seem to be in the right place at the right time to be picking up these passes, stuff like that. Now, as we say, shot selection maybe. I think he learned massively from the outing. I mean, he got a good quality 70 minutes under his belt if you take into account the injury time. And I think that can only be a plus for Limerick. I suppose as well, the Patrick Swell contingent really did step up to the plate here, Kieran as well. Dermot Burns continuing his strong championship start with a phenomenal kind of 6 points from place balls. And then with Conor Prunty out, looking to basically out-hurl Gerard Hegarty, it left massive space inside for the one and only Aaron Gallan to really make hay. And I think an exceptional performance from the sharpshooter from Patrick Swell.
Yeah, and look, without being critical on Gallan, it's about time. I think Gallan has that talent, and he sometimes you kind of question, sometimes he just frustrates you sometimes the way performance he puts in. But like Saturday night, he was just incredible. Over the shoulder, just when he's on, and he was on Saturday night. Really impressive, and needed, because we are lacking in the full forward line, So like Graham Mulcahy, I think for 2 days in a row, I don't think he scored. Now he's doing a lot of work, and was unlucky not to. He had probably a half goal chance there where he slipped when he just caught the ball in front of goal. But like compared to last year, where you had Jamie Flanagan and Peter Casey really, knocking on scores every game they play, like so. The only, like, Boylan didn't score either, so our only inside forward to score was Gallan, so we do need him scoring. I think as well, Dara Donovan this year, I think, was absolutely unreal. It's some midfield partnership. Like, I think, he can be criticised and seen as a weak link in the team, but I think this year, just, he's got about his business. Himself and Will O'Donoghue, they're probably the best midfield in the country. Like, the 2 points he scored to take it out from a 3-point game to a 5-point game, like they're huge scores to get. Really showing his composure, and there isn't many midfields in the country that could put up the two of them boys.
No, absolutely. I think O'Donoghue was so dominant, wasn't he? His 50-50 second balls, like he just literally was completely the focal point. Really setting up the attacks. Dara Donovan he's got a lovely style about him in terms of his hurling skill set. Really kind of a great distributor of the ball as well. And I suppose, like Barry Nash as well. I mean, defensively, I thought Limerick were outstanding in that third quarter. Didn't give Waterford a sniff. Now, Ozzy Gleason came in, had lovely cameos in that first half, cannon lines as well. Adjustments were made at halftime from Limerick, and they were kind of snuffed up for a little bit. But I suppose credit to Austin Gleason. I thought his movement throughout the game was absolutely phenomenal. He had a few sideline cuts, 3 points from play. But when other players in Waterford were kind of literally not there, I thought Gleason showed kind of his talent and his leadership for the Waterford cause, and I suppose, prompting that final quarter kind of comeback for them.
Yeah, and the three players I think you mentioned that I would have picked out that had an unbelievable game for Waterford, Ozzy Gleason would have been one of them. Yeah, he's just, he's back to what he was a couple of years ago, a real threat going forward. Desi Hutchinson, like, you look at the last few games where Limerick would have played Waterford, Sean Finn would have had his card marked. Like, he would have held them scoreless, and, he really struggled against Finn. And I think maybe it could be the monkey off the back for Hudson in that regard. Like, scoring 5 points looked really good, especially in the second half there. He notched off 3 points in a row. He was unbelievable. And Lyons as well, he's you kind of compare him to Kyle Hayes for me, like, a big type lad, physical and, running at goal. He's a dangerous type of guy. And I think once you get Jamie Barron back in there as well in midfield, like, he'll add to that threat. But I think really, like, we probably won't give Limerick the credit they do as much as other people because we're from it. And you don't want to seem over cocky or confident, but I think looking at Limerick to beat your closest rival without 4 all-star players has to be a sign of how good this team are. If you were to compare the players like Peter Casey, I would compare to Desi Hudson. So if Waterford missing Desi Hudson, Kyle Hayes, I compare him to Lyons. Shamie Flanagan, say Stephen Bennett and Lynch for Ozzy Gleason. So if Waterford were missing Hudson, Lyons, Bennett, and Ozzy Gleason, they wouldn't be a patch of a team. So I think it's a real credit as to how well they've performed the last 2 games with such significant injuries. Hopefully, I think you'd hope that the Tipperary game will be kind of a formality. Saturday week, Sunday week, and you'd be looking strong with 6 points going into the last game. You wouldn't need a result in Ennis, and I suppose the outlook the management will probably have is to try and get all 4 guys back, fit and for the All Ireland series, when it really matters, really really important, like.
Exactly. Yeah, I think results do breed success as well, Kieran. I don't think there's any. They will go hammer and tongs here to go 4 from 4. But I suppose going back to Waterford, I suppose Liam Cahill, Michael Bevins, I suppose they'd had very much high hopes going in. I mean, as we said last week in this podcast, they have a week by week after the 2-week window. So this really was one that they could really target. But I suppose the lull, but then, the 2 goals from Stephen Bennett and also Jack Prendergast as well, which maybe exposed a few things again from Limerick defensively. That run game from Waterford, which was pretty sporadic at times. They had threatened it in the first half, but for that Jack Prendergast goal as well, maybe a little bit of concern here from Limerick in terms of being cut open very a la Shane Kingston against Cork.
Yeah, very similar goals, I suppose, if you look at them, but I'm going to give the benefit of doubt on him. Mikey Kiley, he's obviously only back from nearly a 2-year hiatus, and I think the more games these guys play together, the better as a defensive unit they get. I think if you look, Waterford also had 2 goal opportunities. One was, I think, Mikey Kiley was blocked by Nash, and the other, I think it was Gleason, who was blocked by Finn. So that was defensively, they were, they held firm there. Like, Waterford are going to bring goal threat, so I think, okay, I think there'll probably be a disappointment about Stephen Bennett that they should have been stopped, so I think if you're only conceding 1 to 2 goals against a goal seeking Waterford team, I think you're actually probably doing okay.
Yeah, because as we've seen in the league, Waterford have really had that goal threat, the 3-4 goals, and I think Hutchinson had flashes, Stephen Bennett as well. Maybe, I suppose, Waterford, from their perspective, maybe a bit of shot selection issues down the stretch, and particularly in that opening period when they had a nice little breeze behind them. Maybe some things to learn from. But I think from Liam Cahill and Michael Bevins' perspective, the team never gave up, which is fair enough. But as you said, Kieran, at the start of this podcast, I think the composure that Limerick showed, particularly when it went down to a 1-point game, the momentum was all with Waterford, but their composure, and again, Declan Hannon again at centre half back, being composed, orchestrating things, setting up the attacking platform, and then bang, we get the few points in front. And again, had a few points missed at the end, but it was just their sheer composure. I think it's just that team ethic within Limerick. They're just kind of, they're all in together. The composure, the willingness to kind of work so hard for each other really did come out in spades there, particularly in the last 8 minutes when the game was really in the melting pot.
Yeah, and look, it's evident they're playing to a structure. They're all so familiar and comfortable with the structure. So I think when Kylie's saying, next man in, if it's a case the fella goes down, that they're all comfortable with, and they know the job they have to do. I think you look at Boylan, who's kind of a surprise inclusion for the game. He didn't score, but he worked his socks off, physically, one freeze, and just that threat that's all that was there. And he was there to do a certain job, and he did it, So I think the team take to the field knowing what their job is and what they have to do. I think for Waterford, I think everything would have to go right for Waterford to have a chance of beating Limerick. I think Stephen Bennett has been poor the last few days, and he had an unbelievable league. I don't think he scored from play the last 2 days out. Okay, he took his goal very well and obviously hit his freeze, but I think it's another axis that needs to be at its top of its game. I think Bennett needs to be scoring from play. Hudson needs to be scoring from play. Ozzy Gleason, they all need to perform at their very best to even have a slim chance of beating Limerick. I think if we take out injuries, I think if Limerick were to get the 4 players that are missing back, I think they're huge game players, absolutely huge game players.
And I think you've probably hit the nail on the head here, Kieran. That Clare game in Cusack Park could be a time where you're kind of maybe penciling in the likes of a Seamus Flanagan or a Kyle Hayes, getting in a little bit of game time ahead of not getting ahead of ourselves, but maybe a Munster hurling final, just to get that momentum going in terms of form and getting continuity away. I mean, Tom Morrissey as well with 2 points as well. And the subs bench as well came on mighty for Limerick as well. You had Pat Ryan, David Reedy chipped in with a point each, coupled with the 3 points from Cathal O'Neill as well. So I think the subs that did come on did actually make an impact. So I think all in all, I think the physicality, I think it was such a massive advert for the Munster Championship and All Ireland hurling. And I think Sky Sports were pretty thrilled to have that game live.
Yeah, I think looking at the subs, actually, a lot of people would have wrote off look at this is talking very early, it's 2 games in, but a lot of people would have wrote off Limerick sub bench before the championship started, compared to Waterford's, where they had, these star players to come on. I don't think Waterford got 1 score off the bench on Sunday.
No.
So you compare that to Pat Ryan coming on, Pat Ryan gets his fair bit of slack, but he's a great sub to bring in, and he will score nearly every game. Reedy, again, these players would have been highly criticised, especially in this year's league. But to be fair, the last 2 games they've come on, they've performed and they've scored. So we all know from the last couple of years, it's not about 15 players anymore. So you have your starters, you have your finishers, and these guys coming on are as important as the guys starting.
That really did show it in spades in that last 10 minutes. Waterford coming back into it. And, the composure was there for everyone to see, really, at the end, where Waterford were taking a few pot shots from kind of impossible kind of distances. Limerick being very composed, playing the flanks, getting space, getting the frees, getting the points. So I think even from Waterford's perspective, they weren't unscathed from it. Iarla Daly looks as if could be a long-term absentee as well. He went down early and then played on and then went down again.
He probably should have went off earlier. And probably, probably justice to him, really.
Indeed, and you have to applaud the player for trying to kind of keep going. But I think long-term wise injury, that could be a bit of a serious kind of dent for him. And I think all in all, I think it's kind of set up quite fascinating for this rivalry going forward. Anyway, I don't think it'll be the last time we'll see these two maybe in a championship meeting, but I think given the Limerick personnel changes, maybe an opportunity lost for Waterford, but I suppose they can bring a few positives into the next time, potentially, that they face Limerick. I suppose, Kieran, can we then switch to FBD Semple Stadium? I won't lie, I'm 43 years old. I spoke to my father last night, who's a passionate Tipperary supporter. I think, from my perspective, that was probably one of the worst Tipperary performances I've seen in a Munster Senior Hurling Championship game in my lifetime. What were your reactions to that 8-point win for Clare? I just didn't think Tip were at the pace of the game from minute 1 and really were exposed in all facets of play.
Yeah, I think, pretty early on in the league, Tip have been written off this year. I don't think anyone believed that they would be contesting for top 3 teams in Munster. And then they came out and played Waterford and kind of surprised people, and me included. I thought they really pulled up to the Waterford that day. They played with a bit of intensity. The young guys kind of were performing well with the older guys too. It seemed like there was a good mix there, but it was just chalk and cheese, the 2 performances. I think there was a zero intensity to play. There was no, compare the intensity compared to like a Waterford or Limerick. They Clare just ran at them. They opened them up time and time again. I think it's really hard to know how good this Clare team are. I think Tipperary possibly made them look very, very good. I suppose time will tell. But it's, for Tipperary, a proud hurling team, or, one of the main stays in the hurling championship every year, and this isn't something that can be fixed this year. Like this is going to take a couple of years to get right.
I think so, Kieran. I think even you could see the strength and conditioning, the physicality, the fitness. Clare had it in every line. I just didn't get the sense here in Tipperary. Obviously, Colin Bonner has literally gone on record and said this is a rebuild job, work in transition. But dear God, yeah, like I think they may have overperformed Walsh Park, and then this performance, maybe there's somewhere kind of in the middle in terms of this, but you know, you kind of look at Tipperary right now, it's kind of a little bit grave. I think in terms of defensive naivety, again, really costing him badly. Brian Hogan, I don't know what his thoughts were after the match because he produced 2 phenomenal saves.
He couldn't do any more. Yeah.
He couldn't do any more. But again, when you're seeing guys literally player overlaps 40 metres out, wouldn't you think you put in? There was nothing. It was man on man. And then the Tip backline, the pace issues here, particularly in the half back line. And midfield. Midfield, I think, is a weak point for Tip. I think the half-back line have to push up so far. They're leaving massive gaps. And no better team. You have Shane O'Donnell, Tony Kelly, Ryan Taylor, speed merchants. They're literally going to create the overlaps all day long. And so it kind of proved. I think for Colin Bonner, I think this is... And I think the acceptance around the Tipperary crowd in the FBD Semple Stadium was very much of acceptance that this would happen. But even the most avid Tipperary fan, you have to be pressing an alarm bell here because... Looking at the player development wise, this is, as you say, it's going to take a few years, even for the strength and conditioning, the physicality, the fitness required to get to the Limericks and Waterfords. They're a million miles off it at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at, I think it was Duggan's goal, there was 4 on 2 in that goal, you know.
Yeah.
As a, you know, hard going on Brian Hogan, I thought he, you know, 2 amazing saves. You know, Duggan was there for the handy tapping. Yeah, I think going into the championship, I would have obviously feared for Tipperary, but I thought with some of the elder statesmen like Ford, Mcgrath, obviously John Mcgrath, obviously you know he went off with a bad injury, you know, but even Ford didn't score from play, you know, it was all place balls, and I think as well the last day, you know, he struggled scoring from play, you know, they were the guys I needed to take it from. I think the only Tipperary player who you could really say died with his boots on was Cathal Barrett.
Yep.
To be fair, I think he was one of the only ones. He's not a player I particularly like, but I think to be fair to him, he was just unbelievable, and he went all out to. He definitely won his own battle. Yeah, I think Clare, you know, there's some really, you know, I think Kelly isn't going to be relied on as much as he was last year. We'll say, you know, with Peter Duggan now and O'Donnell back in, you know, they're carrying the can a little bit with him as well. So I think, you know, this Clare team, there probably will be question marks defensively, but there's some star players yesterday, like Rory Hayes, unbelievable performance. John Collin, you know, I think he's probably playing his best hurling since he's moved to centre back. You know, he won't get the same space he got yesterday, making runs up the field, but you know, that game and that result will do Clare no harm going forward. They'll gain a lot of confidence, and they will not fear Cork one bit going to Thurles.
Yeah, because we usually have Rory Walsh on, very passionate 6 Mile Bridge man, with us on the podcast, and you know he was kind of concerned going in here that you know this game was a must-win for Clare, but I think even Rory being in the crowd yesterday, I think he'd have to be kind of, the nerves would have been really settled after that first 15-20 minutes in terms of how Ian Galvin's goal went. You know, particularly the Peter Duggan goal and also Tony Kelly's, the penalty, you know, it was literally, you know, didn't have to work too hard for them. But I think, as you say, it's a very exciting attacking unit, isn't it, really, there with those 3. And then you have the likes of the Ryan Taylors, Malsey comes on, gets 2 points as well. Carl Malone, solid performer in midfield. John Conlon, Conor Cleary, maybe on the knife edge a little bit with the early yellow. And there were a few chances for Tip. Now, despite Tip being so poor, 3rd minute, Jason Ford's goal goes in, maybe changes the course of the game. Breen also had a chance at 12 minutes as well. That doesn't go in, but I'd say from a Tipperary perspective, like Ger Brown's goal, but there were just the inaccuracy. It was just literally all over the shop, really, wasn't it?
I think there's 16 wides, like, so you add that 16 wides to the 3 or 4 goal chances, you know, it might have been a closer game, but you know, Clare weren't pushed at all. You know, they were never contested. They had it their own way, and I think it was just a matter of they took the foot off the gas for the second half. They didn't need to go at it as hard, and I suppose they go into that game of Cork having not had a hard game at the weekend. Ever Quilligan, though, that he won't want to see that goal again. Like we all know how important the goalkeeper is now, especially in the new type game or in the modern game. And you need a steady goalkeeper, and that was, wasn't good.
No, certainly wasn't good. I think that's kind of a really kind of flash in the pan, really. I mean, typically that sort of thing doesn't really happen at intercounty level, does it, Kieran, really, to be fair? And I think Clare video analysis probably, kind of closed the eyes there at that one. But I think from that perspective, I think from Clare, the third quarter maybe is one area where even Rory had warned about this in WhatsApp, literally to us, that he worried that maybe Clare would kind of sit back on the lead. And, Jared Brown's goal, he was unopposed for a 40-metre run, which really, if you think about Cork and Thurles, you think of an established run game, the intensity there. They're not going to get away with that, particularly against Cork and particularly against Waterford and Limerick. So I think that lull, they were never really seriously challenged. It went to about 7-8 points, but never at any stage did you feel that Tipperary were anyway kind of in this game. But again, puck out distribution as well was very, I thought, one-dimensional. I think I counted 2 or 3 kind of short puck outs, maybe with 10-15 minutes to go when the game wasn't in the melting pot. Didn't think there was much variation, but I think from a Clare perspective, they do have scope for improvement, which I think is good for Brian Lowe and James Moore and the rest of the backroom staff there, that they can really kind of focus on it. But I think overall, mission accomplished. We can say as much as we want about Tipperary and how poor the performance was, but at least Clare have points on the board. They can now come to Thurles really test a Cork team that look a little bit vulnerable after that Limerick result, and maybe, rattle them and see where the composure is in round 3. I think it'll be a fascinating game.
Yeah, this is going to be a really hard game to call because, are we going to see a different Cork team, a different strategy? It's hard to know. I think the word is they've all been locked away in Foda for the last couple of days. So I'm sure there's some real home truths coming out, and they're going to have a long, hard look at themselves. It's a bit early in the season to be doing it, but nonetheless, that's in the position they're in. Yeah, I think it's going to be a real ding-dong battle. It's basically like a cup final, I think, because you'd imagine winner of this game has the advantage of at least being, I think, maybe third or maybe even second, depending on how Waterford's next 3 games go. It'll be really interesting to see what Cork do. Will they stick with the defensive structure they've been playing with and the players in certain positions, or do they twist? Really interesting to see. I'm sure they're going to come out with fire in the belly and wanting to kind of turn around the results of the last 2 games. Clare will have to bear that in mind, but I think saying that, Clare won't fear them. I think Limerick and Waterford have shown how to get to the Cork team as it was, and I think with Clare's attacking threat, it's something that Cork will definitely have to look at. I think Shane O'Donnell was unbelievable, winning his own ball, just the runs, his touch was unbelievable, for a guy that has been hasn't hurled all last year, to just come back into an intercounty setup and play as well as he did, it's really impressive. And these guys will cause Cork trouble, unless Cork have really changed things around in the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely, and you throw in the likes of young Meehan wasn't considered for the Clare selection. Can you imagine him in the full forward line yesterday, Kieran Collins? Because, I mean, poor Brian Mcgrath went in, and, the third goal, literally he's all, panic. He sees a ball coming in, Duggan's behind him, he concedes a penalty. But, like, Meehan with the pace, you could have Maron Shanaher there as well, physical intent, and particularly in the Cork full back line that, let's face it, is a little bit shaky at the moment. I think, as you say, Kieran, I think it's all points to a very competitive game, and it'll be very interesting just to see both sides. I think Clare will have to up the intensity, because that game yesterday was chalk and cheese to what we've seen in Limerick on Saturday night. I mean, they were kind of poles apart, really, in terms of physicality. But I think for Clare, it's a lovely start, and again, maybe come under the radar a little bit going into that Cork game. Maybe Ed Sheeran might be getting blamed a little bit down in Cork.
I'm sure it'll be an advantage for Clare's or motivation, for Clare. Like the fact that Cork just nominated Thurles, and not maybe fight for Puck you're in. Was it like Cork were, they might see it to Cork were kind of looking down on them and saw it as a victory before it started. I'm sure Brian Lohan will use any sorts of motivation he can. And, to be fair, like Duggan and Mcdonald back in after long spells away, like this far, they're going to get better, I think, as the games go on. Tony Kelly wasn't probably at his best yesterday. Scoring wise, he's done an awful lot of work. But like Kelly will have these days where he's gonna hit goal and he's gonna score a master score as he normally does. And that on top of the attacking threat that's there, as you mentioned, Shane Meehan to come in, Clare, okay, there's no fear Clare in the way they are at the minute. They have young lads there. I think Aid McCarthy as well, who's a long-term injury. I don't know if they're going to get him back for this year, but he would be a huge advantage in midfield when he does come back. Added to that team, they'll be a match for any of the big teams.
Oh God, absolutely. With that forward line particularly, and it'll be kind of a fascinating watch really. And I think you have to give credit to Seamus Kennedy yesterday as well. I thought Seamus Kennedy as well, along with Barrett, really died. I thought with his boots on yesterday. He only kind of restricted Kelly for 2 points from open play, really tried to take the fight as well to kind of tip. But what do you do if you're Colin Bonner, Kieran? You have the bye week coming up and then you have to travel to the reigning All-Ireland champions. Now, I know Tipperary historically, TUS Gaelic grounds, it's almost like second home for Tip. But what do you do if you're Tipperary here in terms of team selection? Do you kind of throw caution to the wind here? Give guys that were on the subs bench a bit of a cameo? Because I think there was a few guys here in that performance yesterday that really should be looking over their shoulder for kind of being dropped from the starting lineup.
I think the planning should probably start now. The restructure, the rebuild. Look, I don't think Colin Bonner can be held accountable for any of this. This is what he inherited. I think everyone kind of predicted this was going to happen even last year. I suppose a lot of people think the Sheedy left Tipperary hurling high and dry. I think he had his eye on one thing, and that was to try and win another All-Ireland with the group of players he had. Obviously, they've lost an awful amount of players that they would have had last year. The Mars, Bubbles, these guys who would have been stalwarts for Tipperary. Shane McCann, John Mcgrath got off injured. So it's a complete change of a team from what they had last year. And I think going forward, I think they're just going to have to start now, just bring in these young lads or whatever plan he has for the future. Like, okay, Ford isn't that old, but Shane McCann, I imagine, isn't going to feature. Possibly mightn't see him anymore for Tip even. It's, I suppose, if the youth is there, I suppose it's questionable if it is. I don't think there's no easy way around this for Bonner. I don't think there's any. If the players aren't there, he can't. As I say, you can only piss with the Mickey you have. So it's it'll be really, really, really hard times for Tip going forward, I think.
Yeah. Now, if I was Colin Bonner, I'm not. But I think from a spine perspective on the team, Brian Hogan, Barry Heffernan fullback, Bonner Marr, Michael Breen, and Bonner Marr full forward. And maybe Noel Mcgrath in a half forward, swinging into that middle third. And then you kind of work whoever you want. Ger Brown probably comes back in, that sort of thing. But then again, you're looking at squad depth. John Mcgrath, it looks as if a very serious injury for John Mcgrath.
I think it's Achilles tendon is the word.
Yeah, that's absolute blow for the player. Wish him well. So then it comes down to squad depth. Are guys really kind of doing it in training? If they are, they have to kind of put them in. As say, there should be no pressure on Tipperary going into TUS Gaelic grounds in round 3, and I'm expecting them to be a little bit more improved. I think there will be a bit of flack. Nobody really, kind of more hurt than the players themselves and management of how things have went yesterday. So I think Limerick will be cautious. They will be aware that there will be some sort of response, but you would think with Limerick, if they can focus on performance and composure, then they should get the win. But I think Tipperary, really, as you say, Kieran, have to really start planning for long term and really kind of getting strength and conditioning, getting the backroom, the infrastructure right within the seniors setup. It's been done in the underage academies. You can see the results are starting to pick up here. So I think from a senior perspective, it's now a long-term program. Colin Bonner has to be committed to by the county board now. this is maybe kind of a wake-up call for maybe one or two delegates within the county board, but it's now not time to panic. And they need to have a guy in the helm here that will leave no stone unturned. And if they could get Tommy Dunn back into a dugout soon enough, I think, maybe next year or the year after, I think they may kind of be competitive. But I think for right now, 0-4 looks.
But where did this go wrong? Like, if you were to, I suppose, look internally, I'm sure Tip will have their own, look at it. Like, how was this let happen from a proud hurling country or county like Tipperary? I could see it last year that, Tip were going to struggle next year, with all the players that had started to walk away in early retirements. I think writing was on the wall for a long time, and I don't think the youth that are coming now, the team who won the 20s All Ireland, if they were that good, I think Sheedy would have had them in there, The centre back for UL today.
Brian O'Mara, Dylan Connolly. Now they're gone to the USA on a traveling year. So,
but like, if things, surely a deal could have been done to have them around this year. Like, Brian O'Mara was phenomenal in the Fitzgibbon final. All Ireland or the series ends in July. Go to America then. They were one of the two guys you would have picked from that team. So, but even the minor team now and the 20s team, they need to pump in the resources into that, as you say, conditioning and anything that can be done for them, because, these guys are going to be needed in the next couple of years.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it was already pre-committed anyway. I think Brian O'Mara, and particularly Connolly as well. I think Connolly's absence has been huge, just in terms of where he can play, the versatility of him. But going back to your point, I think the under-20s, I think the talent was there, Kieran, but I think it was opportunity lost. And I think it was a bit cheap on Liam Sheedy's part to really kind of stick the knife in at half-time yesterday, given that quite a few under-20s had moved to the football because not getting trials, not getting enough run and training on games, asking the question, was there any future for the panel? And probably told no, and then literally heading on. So there has been talent lost here. That like Tipperary are proud hurling county. Like, there's no excuses here. The players are being developed and produced underage. Then it's kind of a case of nurturing them on in terms of 16, 18, 20, whatever. And that, I think, is where Tipperary need to really focus in on, is how they really cultivate. Like, you see it with Limerick again, like Colin and Neil, Coughlin last year, Kilkenny would always bring in the 1-2 players in. We've never seen that with Tipperary kind of really that much in terms of bringing in blooding new players. I mean, Bonner, to his credit, has been the guy to do that. But this has been well overdue, as you say, Kieran. 4 or 5 years ago, this should have been done, but it hasn't. So there has been a good string of players, and players have emigrated as well because they're not getting a run. They're not going to be getting any realistic time. So talent pool completely, diminished. And now they're depending on guys that are very raw, who have the potential there, but are going to need time. They're going to need patience from the supporters, but also time from within the county board, club delegates. They have a coach, Colin Bonner, that has developed hurling programs, WIT. Look, Colin Bonner was the man front and centre of that program. So they have a guy there that will get results, but he needs the support. He needs everything to go his way in terms of everyone rowing with him. So I think, as you say yourself, Kieran, it is going to be a long-term project here. I think Tip have to really stick the course. Maybe we can go down to Chadwick, Wexford Park. Kieran, you're based down in Wexford. What has been the immediate aftermath of that 1-point loss to Dublin? But in fairness to Dublin, I thought they were worthy winners.
Absolutely. I think, overall, over the 70 minutes, they were definitely the better team. I think Wexford might have finished strong, but it was all, it was freeze. Wexford had 10 points from play and 2 points from the inside 6 players from play. So I think that tells its own story. They relied heavily on from place balls. Was 13 frees over the whole game. Like Mikey Dwyer, Ocean Foley, Charlie McGuckin, Roy O'Connor, Conor McDonald, Kevin Foley. 2 points from all of them 6 players combined. I think that tells its own story. I kind of highlighted last week that, not enough ball was going into the forwards, and I think that's proof of the pudding there. For 2, just for 2 points from play from 70 minutes of hurling, it's diabolical, really. In saying that, Wexford probably did have chances. They missed 1-4 from place balls. I think Chin hit a few kind of wayward frees. Obviously, the penalty save, great save by Sean Brennan, but a chance nonetheless. and Conor Mcdonald missed an absolute sitter. The Roy O'Connor placed an unbelievable ball across, turned. He did everything, did all the hard work, and all he had to do was finish it and missed it. I think it's a sign of Conor McDonald consistency. Like he will do it one day. He did it the last day against Galway. Got a great goal, or a sitter's goal, but he got it. But then the next day, there's no consistency there, and to be a top team, you need your top players playing consistently. End of. Roy O'Connor, he worked hard, but he's working off scraps. There isn't enough ball going in, and I think it's been highlighted before. Wexford's, half forward line just isn't good enough. It's not doing half as much work, and they're most of their shooting and shots are coming from either the half back line, midfield. I think Wexford need to start trying to get the ball back in. They did it early in the league. Roy O'Connor cleaned up. I know he's not going to get the same space in championship, but they can't score unless the ball starts to go in. But not taken away from Dublin. Donald Burke, another unbelievable game, 12 points. And I think Dublin were probably just stronger over the 70 minutes, and it probably would have been unjust if they didn't win, I think.
Coming from a Dublin side, we'd kind of mentioned last week, I thought it was a nervy performance against Laois opening day nerves, but I thought they were so well drilled in terms of their style of play, stretching that Wexford defence out width-wise. And with a guy like Donald Burke and the form that he's in at the moment, he's gorgeous strike of a ball. 12 points, 5 from play. Superb. And really led by example when you saw certain guys in Wexford kind of not really doing it on the other end of the pitch. But I suppose Dublin will be very happy. Like last 10 minutes, they were down to 14 players. Collin getting the second yellow now. I think that maybe have been an accumulation of fouls, maybe, from Fergal Horgan. So, but again, I think from a Dublin perspective, to a man, defensively, they really did put in the shift at the end. I mean, I thought Owen full back. Then you had Danny Sutcliffe's late block on Liam Ryan. Sean Brennan was absolutely superb in the Dublin goal, for Fanning's penalty. Rory O'Connor had a chance thereafter. So, I mean, to a man, they really did stand up. And I think, to be fair, maybe the more accurate team on the day.
Yeah, I think Cian Collin, he has a bit of form for, I think it's his second red card this year. Yeah. It was persistent fouling. Owen O'Donnell, Owen O'Donnell is one of the best fullbacks in the country, without a doubt. Even getting up for a point as well. I think that showed Wexford's play really when O'Donnell made a run up. Like I think it was Liam McGovern chased him and tried to dispossess, but he dropped the ball, still managed to pick it up and had time to slot it over. The work rate from Wexford's half forward line, midfield, it's just not what it should be when you compare to the Waterfords, Limericks, even Clare on Sunday. It starts from there. It's just not there. I think as well, Cork do this as well, like not contesting the short puckouts. I think it's just a sign to the other team that it's like, we're afraid of you putting the ball long, so we're happy to let you have the ball and run with a short. You're inviting teams on. I think there was, obviously I said Cork do it as well. I just can't understand why you wouldn't push up and put pressure on them. But I think it's just a real sign that Wexford do not want the ball going long, because, they're a bit, their half back line is probably their best line, but early they wouldn't have the ball winners that other teams might have. I think, that's something that they should really look at going into the next few games, because if you give the likes of Kilkenny free roll to come out with the ball, they're just going to destroy you, going forward. Damien Reck, another unbelievable game again. I think he's probably Wexford's most consistent player all year. Really taking the fight to him, 3 points from play. They're not out. I think they have Laois and Westmeath. So you're thinking they're going into the last game with 5 points, but they're going to have to beat Kilkenny in Nolan Park to have any chance of being top 3.
Exactly. That's a huge task. But I suppose need to get through Laois and Westmeath and build a bit of form, build a bit of momentum going into that game. But I suppose going back to Damien Wreck here, Kieran, you're the same person as Damien. Has he been played out of position here? Because like the points looked very much middle field. Would he be a midfield option for Wexford if push came to shove here?
I think Damien Wreck's best position is probably wing back.
Yeah.
I think he offers so much going forward. He's an unbelievable man marker as well. Actually, his brother Shane, he's out injured at the minute. He's probably more of a man marking defender than what Damien would be, and he's a big loss back there. But Damien, I think he's unbelievable. He plays centre back for the club. But questionably as well, I think he should be wing back. He offers so much going forward. He knows where the goalposts are. He's tough, he's steely, and I think I've really impressed him this year for Wexford.
Yeah, no, it was a super cameo from Damien, and that second half, some lovely points. Same with Mark Fanning as well. 3 points, and I suppose the penalty save as well. Is there maybe a discussion down in Wexford in terms of maybe changing a penalty taker, given that a miss from Fanning, or does Darragh Egan retain faith in his goalkeeper to slot these penalties in?
Yeah, I suppose as long as I can remember, Fanning was the penalty taker, and I suppose you go back to the olden days, and Damien Fitzhenry was the same, so it must be a trend in Wexford. I don't know, but yeah, look, usually he's solid. I think he hit the ball well. He hit it right. I think just Sean Brennan pulled off an incredible save. But I think credit to Dublin. We kind of questioned them after the league. They started really well, but now like they've 4 points. They should have 6 after the weekend. I think they try and win one of the last 2 games against either Galway or Kilkenny for a place in the Leinster final. You know
what, Kieran? Not in the likelihood that they will get to a Leinster final because of their record against Galway is so good in recent years. They don't fear Galway. I mean, Leinster Hurling Championship last year was a complete one-sided affair. So I think Matty Kenny has his homework completely done on Galway. To be fair, now they do have Westmeath this weekend, so you would think routine enough win there for Dublin, and maybe bringing in a few squad players, getting a bit more game minutes under their belt, But it's a fantastic win for Matty Kenny, the hurling program again, and kind of builds that momentum in the capital for the senior hurling team. We thought there was maybe an opportunity lost, particularly in the Alliance Hurling League, that they didn't get into a semi-final, particularly with the Dublin footballers. There was a bit of a kind of league dip there, but they seem to be kind of turning the corner again. Great win again, and the season seems to be going onward and upward. And thanks to Donald Burke, the sky's the limit, I think.
I think the not progressing to the league final probably suited them because they're relying on a certain core of players, 12, 13 guys that they're starting every week. They needed that month off between league and championship. Westmeath next weekend, and then it's an off week for all the teams. So they can, probably a formality that they'll oversee Westmeath, and they'll have a week's break to prepare for two their tough games, Galway, Kilkenny. I think it's Kilkenny up first. That's a rerun of the league game. It's on in Parnell Park as well. Exactly, so they'll look for an improvement from that performance anyway.
Indeed. I suppose we can switch to Galway and Kilkenny here now. Unfortunately for Laois and Westmeath, the heights of round 1 where they pushed Dublin and also Kilkenny fairly hard didn't really materialise here. Now, the Galway performance, 337 to 117 was the final score. There are a few injury concerns here, Kieran, coming from that game. Notably, Daithí Burke and Pádraig Mannion kind of withdrew from the game. Conor Whelan does seem to be a long-term doubt, according to media reports here. Again, 13 players on target. They had a phenomenal shooting statistic. From their first 23 shots, they scored 220, Galway. But it kind of just shown the intensity levels here, Westmeath, just not at the pitch of the game. Joseph Cooney top scored with 1-5. Keenan Fahy from Ardrahan scored 1-4 as well. Again, 13 minutes, it was 1-8 to 1 point. Fahy's goal really opening it up. It was all one-way traffic, though, in fairness. I think Fortune, the Westmeath manager, kind of accepted that Galway were kind of maybe a class apart and just having to kind of regroup a little bit. But and I was in Northmore Church there yesterday. There's a vigil for Michael Duignan, the bishop, that's going to get ordained up here. But the priest did say that any Galway hurling fans that wanted to come in from 8:30, 9:30 on Saturday evening for a prayer before the Kilkenny game, they were more than welcome. So got a mute response, I have to say, from the crowd. But I think from that perspective, Galway kids are really kind of wondering where this team is at, because this game hasn't really proved anything.
I think it was probably just a chance for Galway to roll off with this team after the after the Wexford game. I suppose if they're looking for positives, they're really efficient. 225 from 33 shots. You can't argue with that. Gavin Lee impressed me as well. He's only in leaving cert here, and come on, get 2 points, So the young lads are there. I do think this is going to be a project for Shefflin. I don't think they're going to be All-Ireland contenders this year, but, if they keep producing, and look, this is Galway, like the young lads were always there, Galways have always had good minor and 20 teams or 21s and back in the day. There was no shortage of players there. It was just a matter of getting them together, and probably politics was the biggest issue in Galway to deal with. Yeah, look, I'm sure it blew off some steam. They, put some wrongs right, and they'll go into the game against Kilkenny. It's another huge game. I think this is the game to see who will probably top the group and are definitely be in a Leinster final. I probably do question Westmeath and Laois and the damage they must be doing, shipping these heavy defeats. I think something the GA definitely to look at, and we're Laois better off in the Joe McDonagh being competitive than and Westmeath as well, than shipping these heavy defeats week in, week out, whatever. But a league campaign, like Offaly had the league campaign in the higher tier, and we're then stepping down a grade. But to be shipping these defeats in league and then it's a championship, you'd wonder where, what is it doing for these teams,
Exactly. And again, it's the high intensity games here, Kieran, week in, week out, isn't it? The one-off game, you saw it last week that both teams, Laois and Westmeath, really did perform very well, and maybe we can get to Kilkenny down in the UPMC Nolan Park. 234 to 114. Now, I suppose the story of this game really was that Kilkenny got the job done. TJ Reid got good minutes under his belt, 10 points, 7 from frees. I suppose Owen Cody 1-5, Adrian Mullen 6 points, but I suppose Laois, they were absolutely blighted with injuries here, Kieran. 7 starters: Delaney, King, Dunphy, Marr, Conroy, Kavanagh, Conway, all unavailable for selection. Even going to Nolan Park with a first 15 from Laois, you're really struggling. So to have those guys really unavailable was probably a bridge too far. I think Cheddar Plunkett maybe alluded to as well. How are you going to pick up guys after a loss like that? Going into the homestand starts now against Wexford. How do you bounce back from something like that?
That's what I'm saying. You question what good it's doing for these teams. Okay, they're playing the top teams and they're getting to experience the intensity and what's required. But with no disrespect to Laois or Westmeath, they're not at this level. It's like if you were converted to football. It's like a Division 3 team playing in the Premiership. Week in, week out, getting hidings. It's not doing any good. I think it needs to be looked at. I think there needs to be a restructure. Whether that means losing the Munster competition or Leinster, I think that obviously the football is in the eye at the minute, or maybe proposed changes coming down the line. But I just don't think this is working for the teams like Laois and Westmeath and Carlow and these guys who are their secondary competition maybe, or a B competition needs to be put in place, because I think teams are, if even looking at young lads looking at Laois on the television, where's the enticement to pick up a hurley and play for Laois? If you're shipping hidings to Kilkenny or Galway, week in, week out, it's no good. Not taking away from Kilkenny, I suppose they had the advantage of ramping up a little bit slower than what other teams would have to. Pretty scary that they had 234, get 12 wides in the first half, so what could have been, had they converted some of them. 121 from the Ballyhale trio, TJ, Cody and Mullen. That's huge. Compare, these guys weren't playing early in the league for them. To have these back in, hitting scores like that is unbelievable. One thing I will say though is the Laois goal, which was well worked. I don't think Cody won, but happy with that. There was like the one pass and completely split him open. Great finish, really well worked goal. So I think there will be things they'll have to look at, but I think there's certain players who are performing with a bit of consistency for Kilkenny that sometimes are questionable. I think Walter Watch, 4 points in play. Again, Padraig Walsh, 4 points in play. I think you can just mark the team sheet before he even starts, because every week he's played 4 or 5 points in play every game. So it just shows how good a player he is. And I think it'll have a real battle against Galway. And at the minute for me, I think Kilkenny are definitely favourites to win Leinster.
I think one of the kind of backdrop stories here would be Kilkenny, what selection Brian Cody is going to unveil here, because you had TJ obviously coming back, TJ Reid. Conor Brown coming back from the hamstring injury, I think, is a key one as well. We hadn't seen him in the league. I think he's a key guy there. Does an awful lot of the dirty work, the dirty ball work. So I think for him, very welcome to come back into the squad. Shane Walsh and Tom Phelan as well. Tom Phelan had a good league, then kind of had the injury against Dublin. He's come back into it as well. So I think we were kind of criticising in terms of squad depth, but I think certain guys now are really putting up the hands. So I think for Brian Cody and selection management team, it will be an interesting selection. But I think here in Galway, there is they've been penciling in this for the start of the year once Henry Shefflin got in charge. I think the Shefflin Cody thing is going to be kind of written to death, and we're kind of maybe guilty of saying it here in this podcast. But I think, what does Henry Shefflin have on his sleeve to really unlock Kilkenny here? Now, Galway guys definitely have to be at the pitch of the game here for sure. But I think it's a fascinating watch to see those likes of David Burke come in, real talisman like that. They're going to take the game by the scruff of the neck. I think it's required. And Salt Hill here with a 15-20 kilometre breeze coming in from the Atlantic. It's not going to be a calm day by any stretch off the pitch, but certainly on it. I think it's going to be a fascinating watch. I think Galway are kind of going to be hyped up here. I think this is going to be one of probably championship games of the season here in Leinster. So I suppose, Kieran, it's been a lengthy one, but maybe some predictions. I'm assuming Dublin, Wexford, accounting for Laois and Westmeath, I suppose, is it?
Safe
and then your call it, I suppose, for Galway, Kilkenny. Who do you fancy?
The two other games are going to be really hard to call. But I think, based on what I've seen so far, I know they haven't been tested so far with the two games against Laois and Westmeath, but I just think, I think Kilkenny are that bit ahead of Galway. Galway are probably playing with a lot more younger guys, and it probably is a project and a 2 or 3 year plan. But I think at the minute, with the players they have, I think Kilkenny. And I'm really torn in the Clare Cork game. Really impressed with Clare. But you're expecting a bite back off Cork. They've had 2 weeks now. They've been locked away in photo by all accounts. I'm sure they're going to have a real long, hard look at it. I think the whole Thurles thing, is a motivation for Clare with the Ed Sheeran, and Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I think this Cork are probably will have a better forwards. The Cork forwards are better than Clare's forwards. It'll all come down to the defence and how they'll handle Clare's attack. But I think there has to be a bite back in Cork. And for that reason, I'm going to go Cork. But it's really, really close.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me anyway, I think up here in Galway, it'll be... I will tip Kilkenny just purely because I don't think Conor Whelan's going to feature here. And they really do need someone in that full forward line really to lead the line, provide that physicality, that kind of ball. I think Joseph Cooney's been playing outstandingly well, but I think they're going to need a little bit more from Brian Concan. They may need a little bit more from Gavin Lee, Cotton Ireland. And against Kilkenny, such sticky backs, I don't think they will have their flashes, but I just think Kilkenny might just have enough here. But again, I'm just fascinated to see what Henry Shefflin comes up with in terms of tactics here. What can he do here to expose maybe Kilkenny a little bit? Has he learned from the master? or vice versa. I think it'll be an intriguing call anyway. Kieran, it's been a lengthy one here, but many thanks anyway. Some great points here, and we can certainly review the games from next week. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.